2 or 3 years ago, when I hadn't been in Puerto Rico very long, we stopped at a restaurant one day and I had some beef. I don't even know what this dish was called. That was covered with a guava barbecue sauce. That was so good, I haven't forgotten it yet. So that inspired me. And I'm going to make a meatloaf that has a guava glaze. If you're like me and you're totally unfamiliar with guava as I was at that time, you are in for a very pleasant surprise. So I started with 1.5 pounds of ground beef and a 1/2 pound of ground pork. I like that combination. To that, we're going to add 2 eggs, which I'll beat up slightly. Now we're going to add 3/4 cup of panko breadcrumbs. And I added a 1/2 cup of milk because I just wanted those to start getting soft. So I have a small onion chopped up, pretty fine, and like 4 cloves of garlic, 3 or 4. They were kind of pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fry these onions until they soften up a little bit. Then I'm going to add the garlic for a few seconds or a minute, and then we're going to dump that into our meatloaf mix. Now we're just going to fry those until they've softened up a little bit. While that's taking place, we've got other stuff to add to the meat mixture. One is a tablespoon of adobo, and you can find that in the Spanish food section of most supermarkets. We have a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. We have a teaspoon of soy sauce. Let me check that. Nope, that's a tablespoon also. So we have a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce and a tablespoon of soy sauce, a teaspoon of black pepper. And we're going to mix that up a little bit. You want to be careful with over mixing. You can make a meatloaf pretty tough if you mix it too much, but it's got to be mixed. It is an exceptionally humid day in Puerto Rico today. It rained quite hard this morning, and though it never got hot, it got to better than 85% humidity after the rain. All right, those onions are looking pretty good. I'm going to add all of the garlic. Say one thing for it, garlic does smell good. Too much of it I don't like, but I like it up to a point. I'm going to try lining my loaf pan with parchment paper. I don't really want that much parchment paper sticking out the sides, so I'm going to trim it off. So let's add our onion and garlic mixture to the meatloaf. Normally when I make a meatloaf without a recipe, I would add some tomato soup or tomato paste, but there is no tomato in this one whatsoever. And I don't ever use ketchup with meatloaf, but the only ketchup I actually can tolerate is at McDonald's or possibly Burger King. I'm going to use my hands. Okay, we're going to call that mixed, and we're going to put it in our parchment paper lined pan, filling in the voids so there's no big air spaces anywhere. Now, I didn't mention it, but my oven is preheating to 350. And once this is in the pan and the oven is preheated, we are going to bake this for 45 minutes. Then we're going to pull it out and add some glaze and put it back in. All right, let's see where our oven is at. It is almost at 350. This is our meatloaf so far. Hopefully, it's going to end up as good as I'm hoping. This is actually a Puerto Rican Puerto Rican leaning meatloaf because it has the adobo and the garlic in it. And the guava on top kind of seal the deal. As I said, guava is some good stuff. Just to be on the safe side and to make it a little bit easier to take out of the oven, I'm going to put that pan on this pan with some parchment paper. We are going to call that 350. And as I mentioned, we're going to set a timer for 45 minutes. And while we're waiting, let's make the glaze. For that, we're going to need a 1/2 cup of guava paste. You can also use guava sauce, but instead of a 1/2 cup at that point, you would want 2/3 of a cup. Now we need a little water, and that's going to dissolve in the water, theoretically. Let's do this in a bowl. We'll add a little bit more water, and then I'm just mashing it with a fork until it dissolves and becomes a smooth paste. A smooth sauce, maybe? I don't know how pasty it's going to be at that point. And I'm going to give it a little bit more water still. It would be less work and quicker to use guava sauce, but I don't always like to do things the easy way. Well, I was going to use that little frying pan right there, but after seeing what I have here, I think I'm going to switch to a small saucepan. Okay. Now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. This is just to brighten it up a little bit. I don't know if it'll fit all in this bowl or not, but we're going to try to find out. And that's 2. Now we're going to add a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. And we'll add this to our mixture. And then we're going to add a tablespoon of honey. Now you can use brown sugar instead of honey. And it seems to me that if I use a liquid, it'll make it less likely there's any graininess in my glaze. But that's just me thinking. That's not necessarily true at all. Then we need a tablespoon of soy sauce. Now I use a low sodium. Now the last ingredient, a half a teaspoon of lemon or lime juice. And this is entirely optional. I don't like lime, so I'm going with lemon. Probably lime would be more tropical. I'm a little curious about the flavor. I hope some of the vinegar flavor cooks out, because right now that's a little on the strong side. This is the smallest pan I've got, so it's the one we're going to go with. Now that we've got it in a bigger container, I can stir it up even more. And let's heat it for a few minutes. Here's our meatloaf after 45 minutes. It obviously is not quite done. It's not supposed to be. And what we're going to do at this point is a couple of things. One of the things I'm wishing is that I had left the sides of the parchment paper a little longer. I'm not sure I can lift that out of there as it is. But that's what we want to do, if we possibly can, is lift this out of here without breaking it in half. Good. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and soak up some of the liquid that is still all over the place here. Then we're going to bring back the glaze that we made earlier, which I wanted to taste again. Oh yeah, the vinegar did indeed cook away. And now we're going to just brush the meatloaf with the glaze. I'm telling you, this is going to be delicious. Now the oven's still going because this is going back in the oven. Now we're going to paint the sides as well. Okay, now it's going back in the oven for 15 minutes. Again, it's still at 350 degrees. And that's going to sit in there for 15 more minutes. So I'll be back. Okay, now it's been in the oven for 15 more minutes, so a total of an hour at this point. And what we're going to do is just put a little more glaze on the top and a little more on the sides. And then we're going to return it to the oven for a few more minutes. And first I want to check what the temperature, internal temperature actually is. So let's take a look at that. It's about 150, so we want it to warm up more. So we're going back in the oven for another 10 minutes. Might want to open the oven door first. And I'm actually going to kick the temperature up just a few more degrees. And set the timer. I'm really good at forgetting to set the timer, which is not a good thing. I'll be back. And we're at the final part of the meatloaf. This is it. This thing is 160 degrees inside. It's totally done. And we're going to let it set for about 10 minutes and then we'll cut into it. So I'll set the timer for 10 minutes just so I know that it's been sitting long enough before I slice into it. Okay, here's our delicious meatloaf. Let's take a look. Let's slice this baby open. Maybe hold it with a fork. There we go. Oh, look how good that looks. And let's take a taste. That is everything I hoped it would be. It came out perfect. It is savory, it is sweet, maybe a little tiny bit tangy, but not really. But it's not overpoweringly sweet. I'd suggest you might want to make this one. And that's it. That's the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.